I'm feeling right now, Mark, is palpable.
That's good. That's good. And I think I mentioned to you, I just recorded a video for myself, which basically answers the question. What do you carry in your bag?
Yeah,
And
it's
as I went through the video, I just pulled out of the bag the very thing. It's just a small little blue bag that I
yeah.
carry. So it's fresh in my mind what these 5 are, and they are truly the top 5. So, all right, well, that's where we started.
That is where we are starting. I don't know if you listened to it. It's okay if you didn't. But a couple of episodes ago on our podcast, myself and Lisa, we had an episode. We had Chris Ortiz actually come in and guest interview us because we traveled to Switzerland for a job and we lost our luggage.
Uh,
And so the scenario of the props you bring, we were talking about the facilitator nightmare of what happens when. And so we changed a 2-day plan in the space of a dinner, sitting there on note cards, went from props to propless in a very short window of time. But
yes.
so it could happen.
Okay.
But let's say on the positive end, let's say we do not lose our stuff. Mark, what are your top 5s? Now, I feel like I want to I'll add in post drum rolls and other sound effects to really enhance this because of the anticipation. But the top 5 props you never leave home without.
Well, so I think I have very similar experiences as yours. For 35 years, you can't have traveled the world, particularly in planes, where you expect everything that you're left with, you actually arrive with. So there are those occasions where I had planned to use some props and ended up having to find a no prop way, which, no accident. It's the book that I've written 3 times now. Each time it gets bigger and bigger. So it doesn't answer the question, but there are 5 resources or tools or props that I do use and I'll share. But honestly, at the top of that list, like at 0, is no props. Like I think any facilitator that can just grab out of thin air an exercise, an experience that helps people connect, I think that is a kicker. Like that will always bring you home. But there is a list of 5 things. There's a little bag I take with me, and if I am nothing if not lazy, Phil. At my core, as I've gone further and further into my career, I've understood that if I can do as little as possible, such as carrying things and schlepping stuff around the world, even better. And I know you haven't seen these yet, but I'm going to show them to the camera as well. But here comes number 1. The number 1 prop are the Ubuntu cards. Now, I recorded this, and it's got nothing to do with the fact that you happen to be connected to the folks who produced this. But the Ubuntu cards has now been part of my repertoire for well over 15 years. I remember when Ryan McCormick sat around in the lounge room of Nate Follin, our good friend of ours, and we looked at this thing called the Ubuntu cards. And it was remarkable. It's like, oh, that looks really fun. And not until, of course, you start to use anything do you discover just how powerful it is. So I do not go anywhere without this. I don't go to many family or social outings without a pack of my Ubuntu cards because there's no language. So I can travel the world with them and understand that people are going to appreciate that there's no language on here that they need to understand. They just need to identify a shape or a color or an object. So for me, in the world of what I do, Phil, helping people connect, this is all about that. That's what the essence of Ubuntu is, those common bonds. So I'm not blowing smoke. Yeah, I am truly adding this to my list. No matter who would have asked me that question, it sits at the top. So if I was to be told, Mark, for the rest of your career, you could only have 5 resources or 5 tools that you could use to help people connect, this would be at the top. And if I had to drill it down even further, this would be the number 1. Absolutely. And I know because I add the Ubuntu cards to the store of Plamio, whenever I turn up at a training or a conference, it is always the number 1 seller. Not just because I used it, it's because of, I think people see possibilities in the way in which the cards can be used. It's like, because they're exciting, they're fun, but they can also understand that when combined with facilitation, carefully crafted questions, and a sequence of experiences, that this helps people bond, reinforce, and strengthen relationships. Have you heard of them?
Yeah,
Have you come across them?
I've never. No. as I grab one from my shelf, but the wonderful thing I think, and this is, and I say this not just as a high five employee and someone who goes to conferences and sells these. Before that, even the very most varied range of activities you can do with one product for me, and
Yep.
that's why. Typically, I actually wrote my list too because I was intrigued to see how many we shared.
Oh,
I wrote Ubuntu at number one also, and
snap.
and often when I was looking at my list, I was trying to think the diversity of range of activity, and I would say for me, Ubuntu, you can use it in so many different ways, from problem solvers to icebreakers to connection activities to reflection tools.
Yep.
And I'm almost guaranteed if I was to ask Ryan, he had no intention for these to be as broadly diverse and useful as they were
Yeah.
when he made them. And it's been a response to the people who've used them, who have shared ideas with us, helped us then write a book about them, all
Yeah.
of that kind of stuff. So
Absolutely.
I absolutely agree.
And you mentioned a really critical feature of why these end up as my top 5, and there's versatility. That you and I both know there's a lot of really expensive, fancy, wonderful tools out there that possibly have one or two uses. And honestly, again, from the essential laziness of myself, is that I'm not going to carry that thing if I can only ever use it one way. I wanted something that if I literally was caught, I could use probably for 4 hours and everything would still be very, very different. So versatility is one. Expense. These often are very inexpensive if they cost you anything at all. So that's another factor why they sit in my top 5. So are you ready for number 2?
I'm ready for number 2.
Okay, number 2. It's another deck of cards, not to do with me, but the Weekendit cards. What a surprise. My guess is you possibly have them on your list, but I don't know. You haven't told me yet. But these are produced by We and Me or Chad Littlefield. Many people often regard Chad and I as twins. Only our mothers can tell us apart. We just live in different sides of the world. Again, from a versatile, very simple, but very attractive resource, this is right up there. It sits at number 2 in terms of my go-to prop to help people connect. It's simple. It clearly involves language, so it limits me in terms of the ability to use with populations that don't speak English. But then, even then, you've still got color and you've got that little person at the back, the stick figure doing an action, that can still work on those situations. So that for me is my number 2. How about you?
It does not feature on my list, and I don't say it in any way to disparage because I have them in my bag.
Of course.
But for me, once again, I was trying to think of versatile in a way that was more. I don't even know how to explain some of the ones I've put on here, but maybe I will when I get to it. Would you like to hear my 2? While we're
Yeah.
my number 2. My number 2 was spot markers.
Oh.
Circular poly spots. Now, the ones that I have, I don't have them with me, and I apologize to the listeners, but they're multicolored and they have numbers on them.
Yep.
And I would use them for activities such as key punch is the one that people might be familiar with. There's another one called memory. It works well, though, also to highlight positions and placements in circles during things such as Let's Make a Deal and other such activities. So I feel like I can use it in multiple ways. And since these ones particularly are small, I feel like I can pack them in a bag pretty easily. So that was what my number 2 was.
Yeah. And it would sit in my top 10, definitely those gym spots or rubber spots. Do you have the bigger ones, like they're about 300 mil wide?
I used to have those ones, the bigger ones. Now mine are now smaller, probably the size of a mug. The reason is just mainly for the space and the size. I used to have these really big blue ones with yellow numbers on them. And then I have these big orange ones, but they're just too heavy. So they sit often in my car if I can travel easily with my car, but they don't sit in my travel bag if I'm not
on planes.
driving.
Absolutely. They're very, very heavy. And again, your muscles are bigger than mine. It fell below top 5 because they're just heavy.
Because of musculature. I thought you were going to say because of musculature. Yeah, that's how I try to weight up mine too, is whether or not I could lift them.
When I was younger, it was certainly in my top 5, Phil. Hey, so in terms of number 3, it's a bit like that. It's one of those things that help you. It's not it's not designed for a particular activity. It can be used in lots of activities, and that is a rope. Now, I'm just using a piece of old Kerr
So,
mantle here. It's like a buddy rope.
yeah. Hmm.
You and I both know there are dozens of activities that can involve the rope, whether it's the skipping
Hmm.
rope, whether it's a boundary rope, whether it's just marking a space between two sides or a safe area. And then there are specific activities in which you would invite a group to identify, is this a knot or not? And so on and so on. Can you tie an overhand knot? Blah, blah, blah. So again, in my top five, I have a lot of little ones, kind of heavy. Sometimes I might decide to leave them behind if I'm on a plane. But generally speaking, if I only want a couple, that's very, very easy. They fit in a little bag and I am good to go. That's number three.
Number three for me, and why I had a little giggle, is
Ah, snap.
unbelievable. And I want to be honest that it truly is number three, because people might see this and think, oh, I haven't. So I will show my list at the end
Oh,
to the screen just to prove it. But yeah, I would say I actually put webbing and rope. I just any form of cordage really,
yes.
because
Yep.
there's so much versatility I found with just boundary ropes, but
Yep.
also small lengths. Past the knot is a wonderful reflection that I will often
Mm-hmm.
use.
Yep.
There are a lot of things, and I agree. I have probably 5 or 6 different lengths and diameters, and I do choose based on where I know that I'm going to be
Yeah.
carrying stuff. And webbing is my go-to, probably in my bag if I want to save on weight.
Yeah.
But
And
it's
my guess is
yeah,
all your webbings are different colors as well.
they are. Yeah, yes, absolutely. I have 5 different colored pieces of webbing. It allows me also to then make that webbing into the map of the world and show the
Yep.
continents. I often
Yes.
use that, and
Yep.
I've got in
Yep.
different lengths because based on the similar activities that we all know and use. My
Yes.
favorite webbing is red. I don't know why,
Oh, it was
but I
faster.
particularly grab for that one.
Yeah, well, it's faster. That's why.
Yes, exactly. And
All right.
that's not to do with musculature. That one.
No,
That's
no, no.
pure.
Although a bit of rope can be kind of heavy sometimes, but the webbings are pretty cool. And I think I've got about 12 different colors of webbing I've picked up
Oh.
over the years, which is awesome
Mhm.
because when I do create that map of the world or the community in which the group is sitting, that mapping activity,
Mhm.
each of the different spaces or different things they've identified is a different color, which is,
Yeah,
visually very attractive to be a part of. So,
very
all right,
much
we've
so.
gone through number three. So far, we've got
There
two
you go.
left. The next one, number four, deck of cards. Very simple, very simple. Uh, Again, so versatile, inexpensive. Most people have got them in their back pocket or in their cupboard or in their back of the classroom or wherever it is. And just so many powerful ways that they can be used to invite people to interact, to randomly mix people, to challenge them to solve some sort of problem. And here's the other thing that I haven't mentioned to this point, Phil, why these end up in my top five. There's something really
Mhm.
powerful when I'm working with a group, particularly in the early formation stages for a group, that when an individual, a human being, has something in their hand and you invite sharing, the focus is what's on the hand, not on the eyes, because that can be sometimes a
Mm.
bit too threatening for two people who don't know much about each other. So if I'm holding, the five of spades, we're going to be focused on the card, or I'm going to be focused on the
Mhm.
Ubuntu card, or the question on the Weekendit card, or I'm now tying a knot, and so we're focused on the rope. I find that psychologically, if I'm using the right word there, to be a very powerful tool that just opens up opportunities for interaction and for vulnerability.
It's very interesting because I've had people comment on, let's say we're using the Ubuntu cards, and the question prompt that I've given them is not particularly deep, or like the connection point is not deep, but they wouldn't have had that opportunity or wouldn't have jumped into that opportunity had they not had the cards in their hands. If you
Mm-hmm.
just had two people find each other and share without that tool, that prop, you'll get crickets or at least tension,
Yep.
anxiety. You
Yep.
offer often a card, and then it becomes almost gamified, but really not in the way that we've talked out off this recording, which is Duolingo. But
Yep.
we're talking about just holding something. I really like that idea. I hadn't necessarily thought of the power of the holding of a prop in the way that
Oh,
you've just
absolutely.
articulated.
Yeah, so critical. And it had been brought to my attention by a participant many, many years ago who I think had some sort of research in that sort of background. And it was like, it was like a penny dropping for me at that point, Phil. It was like, oh
Yeah.
my goodness, you're onto something here. That's really powerful. And it
Yeah.
gave a point of focus. And it just helped then, so it opened up that gap, that opportunity for people to share and also to be vulnerable if they choose, or at the level at which they wish to be vulnerable.
Yeah, I love that.
So,
My number
deck of
four.
cards. That's
My
number
number
four.
four
So we're number
is
five.
also.
Oh,
Oh
sorry,
yes.
you're number
Oh,
four.
sorry.
Go
My
for it.
number four. It's also a deck of cards.
Ooh.
But it's a different one. This is a newer thing for us, but this is our emotions cards. And the reason I picked these is mainly because I know that you are also doing similarly, but just being able to really talk about our emotional states. It seems like something that has shifted in the last few years. Maybe it's post-COVID, but
Mhm.
really identifying conversation and emotions and being able to be able to talk about them in a more way rather than feeling, which could have felt like a decade ago, maybe touchy-feely or kumbaya-ish. But now we're really talking about our mental health and emotions in a new way, and
Yep.
having a product or a tool that can help once again facilitate conversation in the same way Ubuntu
Yep.
can help facilitate connection. That for me has been a real go-to.
Yep.
Yeah.
Developing that emotional literacy, particularly among young people. But you and I both know there are a lot of adults who are not emotionally
Mm-hmm.
literate either. And the use of a tool of that nature provides this, what do I call this, permission structure to actually talk about it, because it's fun, it's attractive.
Yeah.
They are facilitated in a sequence where it creeps up on you. It's like before you know it, oh my goodness, I can't believe that I'm now talking about this, because at 1:09 at the start of the program, there's no way I would have done that. But how did you do that? It gave that permission structure, and it is a part of the dimension of being a human being. It's not just, we're not human doings, we're human beings, and that is
I've got this
it captures so
humankind be
much of that
both.
emotion. Sorry,
Yeah, sorry, I had the shirt that says
ah,
humankind be both on my. But I 100% resonate, and I think that's the power of the work that we get to do is we get to use these tools to facilitate greater meaning
mm,
and discern greater meaning that leads to lessons that we're able to allow
yep,
people to take forward into their lives.
yep,
And that's why we get excited about the work we do. I think sometimes people can look and you may have experienced this where you're traveling and someone opens your bag and finds all these toys, and I'm using air quotes, in your bag and questions the use of them. And you try to explain them, and it's hard
mm-hmm,
to really explain how they're going to be functional,
yep,
but it's powerful stuff that we're going to do. And my wife sometimes jokes that I say, well, in a very small way, I make better people, better communities. And it
yep,
seems like it's a ego-esque to say that we're doing these kind of things, but that's
yep,
the reality of what we do. And yet if you were to look at my bag, you'd see what you might see as toys.
yep. They're all
Yeah.
tools. That sparked a memory for me, Phil, that I'll quickly share before I go to my number five.
Mm.
I remember being in an elevator once where a gentleman was pitching their elevator pitch. It was a international camping conference. I hadn't met this gentleman. There were thousands of people there. And, we went through the standard, what do you do, where are you from type stuff. And he said he was a builder. It's like, so I'm putting it in the context of the camping conference thinking, so you build campsites. I said, so I asked him, so what do you build? He said, I build people. Bam. I love it. And that, of
Oh,
course, we came out of the elevator together and we walked down the hallway. I can't remember where we were going. And we just kept on talking about that. Well, first of all, his introduction, like his pitch, like just got me. And then I wanted to know more. A wonderful elevator pitch, literally inside an elevator. But I loved it. That's what he does. He
yeah.
builds young people. So it
Hmm.
picks up on what you just said too.
Yeah.
Well,
Okay. Number 5.
number five. So we should remind listeners as we were preparing for this. I did say to Phil, "Would you like me to keep my 5 secret?" And you said yes. So Phil has
Mhm.
not seen this, but my number 5 is emoji cards. It's basically your number 4.
Yep.
This was a set of cards that I created, and it's going to sound like this set of 5 are just commercial products. 3 of them are. That is very true. But it's the fact that they're so versatile, and particularly in this last 5 years, has been like almost battering down the door, looking for resources that help build emotional literacy. I'd love to say, Phil, that this was my idea. It's not. I actually stole this idea or borrowed it from Paradigm Shift, the folks in Oklahoma. They created, in my mind, the very first set of emoji cards. And I loved it so much, but they decided not to actually continue to print and produce these cards. And so with their permission, I said, can I take your idea? I'll expand from 30 to make it 50 cards. So on the back of the cards, there's these 50 emojis. And on the reverse or the B side, when you put all these 50 cards together in a 10 by 5 matrix, you get that School of Positive Psychology matrix, where on one matrix, you've got the level of energy that you would emote, and the other side is the level of pleasantness. And so you're able to plot based on level of pleasantness and level of energy, the actual emotion that that person is feeling. And so it's building their repertoire of words to add to their emotional literacy. Icebreakers, reflection tool. If you were to put the matrix together, it's a group initiative. So again, multiple ways in which they are used. They fit in the back of your pocket. And I love your set of emotions as well. That feelings card set is speaking to the same objectives in our program. So
Absolutely, and they're using the same tools. We use the mood meter, that same concept,
exactly.
which is really important. And I just want to give a shout out as well to Jared at Paradigm Shift. Is a great facilitator in his own right as well. So we've mentioned so many different, not only the tools, but I feel like there's the resources as well. And what I'm going to do as well is I'm going to add into the description all the links to where you can find these things, as well as resources where you can learn activities with them. So I will link Playmio in there. I will also link Tom Smith and Jim Kane's Raccoon Circles, because we talked about webbing. That's a great resource as well. And so I will add these things in at the description level so you can see some of those things that we've talked about, because I think that having the tools is excellent, and we have them, and we've talked about the versatility of them, but then it's giving yourself the information so that you can do what we've suggested, which is turn and shift on the fly and be able to use things in a different way. And I think that is critical to this as well. Without that knowledge, the tools are just what they are, what an outside person sees them as a toy. And what we're able to do is transform their use.
Yeah, no, I think you're right. And imagine, Phil, even if just your set of 5, which there's a bit of an overlap in my set of 5, if we were to list all of the different activities we know that we can easily facilitate, there would be easily a couple of hundred activities. I don't ever think that would be a problem to manage. With that number of activities up your sleeve, with just that small number of props, man, you can hit it out of the park every time.
I forgot, and smart listeners will know that I didn't say my number 5, so I will just quickly add it.
Yes,
it's a bag or a small set of fleece balls or tossable items, and once again, just the versatility of the potential. And that adds another 25 plus activities to people's list as they're accumulating these. So I'll often have something that can be passed, like a group juggle extra activity potentially, or likewise. So thank you, Mark. These are incredible list. It's so wonderful that we have so many similarities. I expected it, but as I referenced before, I will show my list. There it is. I've covered up this just because it's the name of the next episode, but there is my list of all things in the order that I wrote them in. Thank you, Mark.
My pleasure. Absolutely. Thanks, Phil.
Okay.